Wind howled through the crenellations of Blackthorn Fortress, shredding the storm clouds into ragged banners above the courtyard. Sergeant Marcus Adler, once the 32-year-old golden boy of the Alpine Recon Battalion, now stood barefoot on winter-numbed cobblestones, wrists bound with iron cord. Floodlights bleached the color from his gaunt face. Every breath steamed in the icy air like smoke from a dying engine. That single, brutal tableau said everything. Condemned soldier, midnight storm, rifles waiting. The courtyard resembled a centuries-old amphitheater retrofitted for modern judgment. 12 riflemen in charcoal greatcoats formed the front row, M110 barrels leveled at Marcus's chest. Behind them, a knot of officers huddled beneath a flapping canvas awning. Colonel Godfrey Bryson, execution officer, Lieutenant Silas Cade, the tribunal's rising star prosecutor, and a stoic chaplain whose eyes never left the mud around his boots. Farther back, journalists hand-selected by lottery craned under umbrellas, scribbling transparency into spiral pads already damp from sleet. The fortress clock told 0600, 6 iron gongs that shook ice from parapets. With each strike, Marcus felt a subtle internal snap, as if invisible fibers tethering him to the future were severed one by one. Yet he held parade ground posture, meeting the spotlights rather than blinking, a stubborn refusal to gift his captors the look of a broken man. Colonel Bryson stepped forward, boots crunching frost. His uniform seemed carved from the same slate as the fortress walls, decorations gleaming like embedded shrapnel. "Sergeant Marcus Adler," he intoned, voice amplified by portable speakers. "You have been duly tried and found guilty of willful dereliction resulting in friendly casualties. Sentence, death by firing squad to be carried out within 72 hours of verdict. Per Directive 7. Alpha, you may state one final request." A hush settled. Flakes hissed on hot floodlight glass. Somewhere a camera shutter snapped, the sound of history feeding on tragedy. Marcus's lips parted. He let the storm wash through him, carrying away cowardice, leaving only the one truth that mattered. "I want to see Runa, my K9 partner, before I die. 5 minutes. Nothing more." The request skated across the frozen yard like a stone skipping water. Lieutenant Cade consulted a tablet, smugness sharpening his cheekbones. The animal was transferred to Ravensbrook Shelter. Retrieval is logistically unfeasible, especially under this weather advisory. Bryson's brows pinched. The colonel looked ready to echo the denial when Captain Mael Corbett, the post veterinarian, emerged from an archway, rain plastering auburn hair against her collar. "Not unfeasible, sir, just inconvenient. I can have a transport van loaded inside 30 minutes and will assume full responsibility for the dog's behavior." Before Bryson could reply, canine barking rolled through the gale like distant thunder. Heads snapped toward the main gatehouse. A portcullis groaned skyward, and out of the darkness bounded a German shepherd, coat sable ash, gait fluid despite the icy ground. 2 kennel officers struggled with her lead, but she tore free, bolts of sleet sparking beneath her paws. For one suspended heartbeat, everything, rifles, cameras, legalities, receded behind the animal's singular focus. She barreled past the firing line, dodged an outstretched bayonet, and collided with Marcus, rearing upward to plant forepaws against his starved torso. The impact nearly toppled him. Iron chains rattled, but he dropped to his knees, shackles scraping cobblestones. "Runa," he breathed, voice shattering. She licked melted snow and tears from his cheeks while her tail hammered the ground. Guards tensed, safeties clicked, but even Bryson felt the weight of the moment and barked, "Stand down!" Around them, the yard exhaled. Journalists forgot pens. Riflemen lowered weapons a fraction. In the center of Blackthorn's stone jaws, man and dog forged a stillness louder than any pistol report. Captain Corbett stepped forward, seizing the opening. "Colonel, Handler Protocol 18 allows a certified service animal to accompany a condemned soldier if it mitigates risk of self-harm. Recommend 24-hour delay for psychological assessment." Bryson's jaw worked, conscience grinding against policy. Finally, he nodded once. "Execution postponed until 1600 tomorrow. Return the prisoner to holding with the dog. A ripple of incredulous relief swept the crowd. Marcus rose, cold forgotten. Runa glued herself to his flank as guards guided them toward the fortress interior. Snowflakes melted on her fur, steaming faintly in the spotlights. As the great oaken doors boomed shut, Blackthorn's ancient courtyard felt strangely lighter, as if centuries of stone had absorbed a pulse of unexpected grace. Block C smelled of bleach and damp limestone. Guards unlocked a heavy door, ushered Marcus inside, removed his cuffs, and left without comment. Runa permitted to stay by direct order. She completed a swift perimeter check, nose tracing cracks, then leapt onto the bunk's thin mattress, circling twice before loafing in sentinel posture. Marcus collapsed onto the concrete floor, back against bunk springs. Hands free, he stroked Runa's chest, feeling her pulse, fast, then easing as adrenaline drained. For minutes they simply breathed, two fractured halves realigning along an invisible seam. 11 months, he whispered at last. I thought they'd put you down. His voice broke on the last word. Runa leaned forward, pressing her muzzle into the hollow of his collarbone. Tears he'd damned for a year slipped loose, hot against frozen skin. A memory flared. Car-Ack Pass. Dawn. Runa freezing mid-stride, tail rigid. Marcus raising a closed fist to halt Epsilon platoon. Mortar shrieks. Radio static. Wrong coordinates bleeding across a glitching screen. Shrapnel. Dust. Friendly cries cut off mid-syllable. Runa's yelp as she shielded his thigh with her own body. Then medevac chaos, handcuffs, tribunal silence. The bunk groaned as Marcus pulled himself up beside her. They'll shoot me tomorrow, he said, voice steadier now. I can make peace with that, but not with you dying alone in some shelter. Runa's tail flicked once, a metronome of agreement. Footsteps echoed. The cell door unlatched. Captain Corbett entered carrying a medical kit and a stuffed manila folder. She knelt to check Runa's hip scar, old shrapnel wound, then looked up at Marcus. Shelter volunteer said she refused dry kibble unless it was warmed. Figured it was your doing. Marcus managed a small smile. Field rations turned to stone at altitude. Warm water saved her teeth. Corbett opened the folder, lowering her voice. I pulled fragments of Operation Firebreak logs. Most are scrubbed, but enough remain to prove someone accessed the targeting coordinates. Post-incident, under Lieutenant Cade's credentials. Hope stabbed hard, painful as frostbite. Can you prove tampering? Not alone, she admitted, but Leon Ortega, a civilian coder, owes me. He's already brute-forcing the backups. If he extracts timestamps showing a patch file, we can stall the execution. How long? 6, maybe 8 hours. We need a distraction to keep Cade off our backs. She glanced at Runa. Her instincts could rattle him. Marcus nodded, the beginnings of a plan unfurling. At the final briefing, she'll read him like open wounds. Corbett snapped her kit shut, squeezed Marcus's shoulder. Hold the line. I'll be back. When the door sealed, Marcus lay beside Runa, forehead against hers. Snow hammered the tiny window slot, but inside cell 17C, warmth coiled, two soldiers sharing one breath before the last impossible patrol. Block C of Blackthorn Fortress was a hybrid, half medieval oubliette, half modern lockdown. Corridors snaked through the mountain's concrete-reinforced belly, lit by fluorescence that flickered every few seconds as wind rattled power lines. Each cell door bore a small red diode that pulsed like a heart on life support, signaling alarm status. Guards ushered Marcus into cell 17C and uncuffed his wrists. Runa followed unprompted, seating herself sideways between Marcus and the threshold, head high, ears pivoting at every metallic rattling down the hall. The bulldog-faced sergeant of the watch grumbled about fleas, but relented when Captain Corbett produced an authorization slip bearing Bryson's unmistakable signature. The door clanged shut, locking dog and man together. Marcus flexed aching fingers. Purple ringed the cuticles where cuffs had cut circulation. A single bunk, thin mattress over iron frame, occupied one wall. Opposite, a stainless sink dripped at uneven intervals. Near the ceiling, A window slot no wider than a shoebox admitted a ribbon of gray dawn and the faint howl of wind skimming parapets. Runa performed a perimeter check, nose mapping each crack. Satisfied, she hopped onto the bunk despite its squeal, circled twice, the classic shepherd spiral, and settled in a loaf posture, paws tucked, amber gaze fixed on Marcus as if waiting for the sit-rep. He sat on the concrete, back against the bunk, legs drawn, arms draped across knees. For long minutes they simply breathed at each other. In the cell's silence, Marcus heard micro-noises. Runa's nostrils flaring, the click of a claw against steel, the faint echo of a distant cell door. The world shrank to here and now, and in that compressed space, grief could be studied like a specimen pinned beneath glass. 11 months, he said at last, knuckles whitening. They told me you'd been destroyed. I almost believed them. His voice cracked on destroyed. Runa tipped her head and slipped forward, pressing her muzzle into the hollow between his neck and shoulder. The contact sparked a memory, one he had tried, failed, to anesthetize with court testimonies and sedation. The Hindu Kush dawn poured liquid copper across serrated ridges. Marcus knelt beside a withered juniper, eyes scanning 150-meter arcs while Runa quartered the trail ahead. Grapple pinged off his helmet. Epsilon platoon, 15 soldiers spread 2 meters apart, crept behind, trusting his instincts and the dog's nose. Radio chatter was minimal. The path had been marked cold. No enemy movement in 48 hours. But Marcus's skin prickled. Runa froze, tail stiff, every muscle vibrating. She inched forward. Sunlight skimmed a half-buried crate camouflaged with burlap. Marcus's heart thumped once, hard. He raised a fist, halting the line. He toggled his throat mic. Possible cache, grid 17 echo. Wait. Static crackled. Channel interference spiked. White noise crescendo. Damn jammers. He switched to Alt-Freak. Nothing. Runa emitted a low whine, the sound she made when danger nested deeper than explosives, when living threats breathed beyond walls. Marcus unslung his tablet, keyed a quick coordinate broadcast to Recon HQ. Screen stuttered, lines of code scrolling like runaway script. The grid he saw wasn't the valley rim. It belonged somewhere inside their friendly safe lane. He rebooted, impatient. Enemy mortars chose that moment to sing. The first shell detonated behind Squad 2. Air punched the lungs from Marcus's chest. Dust bloomed. Men screamed. He heard Private Chen shout for return fire just as the second blast swallowed his words. In the chaos, Runa body-checked Marcus sideways, deflecting shrapnel that would have chewed through his femoral artery. Her yelp cut above explosions, sharp, pained. Marcus rolled atop her, unsnagging his sidearm, scanning for muzzle flashes higher on the ridge. No shooters. Why? Then it hit. Friendly artillery calibration error. He snapped to his tablet again. Grid still wrong, overwriting faster than he could throttle the feed. Without functioning comms, he made a desperate decision. Retransmit adjusted coordinates manually. Fingers slipped, numbers jittered. He sent. Too late. Another quartet of shells screamed in. Reality fractured into images. Yule's body flipping midair. Blood speckling Runa's fur. A crater swallowing the field radio. Then mud, medevac rotor wash, accusations. Marcus dragged both hands down his face, as if erasing the vision would lighten his skull. I should have fought harder at trial, he murmured. I let them carve the story they wanted because I thought maybe I deserved it. He looked at Runa. But you never believed that. The dog huffed softly, exhale warm against his wrist. Without planning, Marcus admitted a truth that had festered. Part of me wanted the sentence to stick. If I was gone, the ghosts might settle. Runa's response was unequivocal. She butted his sternum hard enough to force a laugh cough from him, then rested her head there, weight anchoring him to the present. Footsteps echoed. The cell door slid open, revealing Captain Corbett with a medical satchel and a manila folder swollen by dog-eared documents. Morning, Sergeant. Mind if I borrow your girl for a quick checkup? Marcus rose. Runa stayed on the bunk until he clicked fingers. She leapt down gracefully, though Marcus saw the micro-limp in her right hip, a souvenir of shrapnel. As Corbett palpated joints, she spoke in low tones. I drove 40 over black ice to fetch her. Shelter volunteer said Runa refused to eat dry kibble unless it was warmed. 6 months they tried to retrain that spoiled habit. Never succeeded. Marcus's lips tugged upward, the first genuine smile in a year. I trained her that way. Field rations turned to stone at altitude. Warm water helped dissolve them. Corbett finished her exam, nodded approval, then opened the folder. Unrelated topic, I pulled every firebreak log fragment I could get via veterinary clearance. Most are fragments. Someone scrubbed server caches. But this line item. She tapped a column labeled Access Override. Lieutenant S. Cade. T-37 HRS verdict. He downloaded the raw targeting file after forensic audits closed evidence discovery. Marcus's pulse kicked, meaning he might have altered the audit trail before trial. Could be housekeeping, but my gut says otherwise. Corbett glanced at the doorway, lowered voice further. I know a civilian contractor, Leon Ortega, genius coder, mild social anxiety, owes me because I saved his rescue collie from gastric torsion last year. He can brute force the encrypted backups and look for timestamp anomalies. How fast? Marcus asked. Fast enough if the storm doesn't fry external lines. Outside, wind punctuated her words with a low keening wail as if the fortress itself mourned. Corbett closed the folder. One wrinkle. Ortega will need system access beyond my clearance. We either get Colonel Bryson to approve it, or we draw attention some other way so cybersecurity is too distracted to notice. Marcus's gaze slid to Runa, who had settled next to Corbett, eyes half closed but ears tracking every syllable. Memories surfaced. The dog singling out a hostile interpreter by scent of nitroglycerin. The way she could stand nose to nose with a suspect and read micro-tremors of guilt. Let them see her with Cade, Marcus muttered, mind-wiring possibilities. If she reacts, growl, posture, they'll call in behavioral containment. That could stall Cade's maneuvering long enough for your guy to dig. Corbett considered, weighing risk. Handler Protocol 18 would justify her presence at the final pre-execution briefing, scheduled 1400. That gives Ortega maybe 6 hours. She offered her hand. Marcus shook it, feeling the tremor in her grip that matched the one in his. They weren't allies by rank. They were coalitioned by truth. When she left, Marcus lay on the bunk beside Runa. He spoke into the hush. We have one more patrol, girl. One more ridge to cross. Runa thumped her tail once, landing on metal with a hollow drumbeat that echoed hope. Dawn crawled from gunmetal gray to dull pewter as snow tapered into a fine crystalline dust. From his bunk, Marcus watched light prise its way through the narrow window slot, painting thin gold bars across the opposite wall, mockeries of freedom that shifted as clouds passed. Beneath the bunk, the dog's breathing was a slow tide. At 0830, a clanging gate announced breakfast. A guard slid a tray through the hatch. Oatmeal congealed into a single trembling mass, a carton of tepid milk, and, courtesy of Captain Corbett, a pouch of warmed chicken broth kibble for Runa. Marcus thanked him. The guard only grunted but left the pouch. Small mercies. While the dog ate, Marcus forced down oatmeal, jaw working automatically. Taste barely registered. His mind sifted through contingency webs. If Ortega gets proof, Bryson delays execution. Open investigation, Cade counters, need public exposure. Each branch ended with a question mark, and at every node, time bled out like sand. A half hour later, the electronic lock disengaged again, but the visitor wasn't Corbett. Lieutenant Silas Cade arrived, flanked by 2 MPs. He carried a tablet, stylus poised. "Sergeant," he said, voice bright as polished brass. "I trust the reunion with your animal has been comforting." Marcus rose. Runa mirrored him, stationing herself half-step ahead, shoulders squared. Marcus placed a calming hand on her scruff but did not seat her. "What do you want?" "A signed confession." Cade displayed a digital affidavit already scroll-filled with legalese. Your appeal counsel is drafting motions that risk dragging this farce out for months. If you sign responsibility for incorrect coordinates, citing stress, equipment fatigue, the record closes clean. In return, he flashed a counterfeit smile, I'll personally ensure your dog transitions to a veteran K9 retirement farm. Serene hills, open fields, humane. Runa's lip curled, revealing a sliver of ivory fang. The low growl began in her chest, deepening until it vibrated the metal bunk frame. MPs tensed. One unclipped a taser. Cade's smile thinned, but he pressed. Refuse, and Army euthanasia protocol applies within 72 hours of your termination. Dangerous animal unsuitable for adoption. Marcus's muscles braided hard. You threaten a dog to secure paperwork? I leverage assets, Cade corrected. At that, Runa surged forward. Marcus's leash hand reflexively clenched, but she was off lead. Instinct guided her. She planted both forepaws on Cade's chest, not clawing, just bracing, driving him back against concrete. Her snarl filled the cell like wildfire crackle. The tablet clattered. MPs shouted. One raised taser. Marcus barked, Runa! Zuruk! The command back hit her like a brake. She withdrew 3 steps, still rumbling, head low, hackles jagged peaks. But her eyes pinned Cade with a condemnation no court stenographer could phrase. Cade straightened, cheeks drained of color. He scooped the tablet, breath ragged. Temperamental beast, Exhibit A, why she'll be put down. He turned on his heel, nearly clipping a guard, and disappeared, leaving the threat hanging like a dangling wire sparking in the air. When the door slammed, Runa patted back and nudged Marcus's thigh, apology in her eyes. Good girl, he whispered, rubbing behind her ear. You spoke louder than I ever could. Captain Corbett hurried along a maintenance passage seldom used except by boiler techs. Concrete sweated. Pipes hissed overhead. She found Leon Ortega hunched over a ruggedized laptop balanced atop a stack of spare fan belts. Ortega wore civilian parka, glasses fogged, earphones streaming code compile chimes mixed with lo-fi beats. You weren't kidding about signal ghosts, he murmured without looking up. Firebreak data pack is triple encrypted, some blocks overwritten by random null packets. But I found residue timestamps from a user ID ending in SK 3902. That matches your prosecutor friend. He pushed a patch file to the coordinate log 2 days before verdict. I'm 90% sure those altered bytes redirected the artillery grid. Corbett's pulse kicked. Can you isolate before and after map points? Already rendered side by side. Ortega tapped keys. 2 topographic overlays bloomed on screen, one highlighted in red, the other blue. Blue is original enemy ridge. Red is the valley safe lane where Adler's platoon got shelled. Corbett swallowed. We need that data in a format Bryson can't ignore. Ortega hit compile. The laptop whirred, thermal vent hissing. Give me 1 hour for a hashed verification report. 2 copies, digital and paper. Make it 45 minutes, Corbett urged. Briefings at 1400. Marcus walked between guards, ankle cuffs chained for protocol but slack enough to allow stride. Runa wore a bright yellow vest reading Service Animal, Handler Required, courtesy of Corbett. Snowmelt dripped from his hair. He'd insisted on an outdoor lap in the exercise pen so Runa could relieve herself and, truthfully, so he could taste sky one more time if everything failed. As they neared the double doors, Runa paused, nose twitching. She emitted a soft woof directed at the ventilation grills. Marcus followed her gaze, then saw faint boot scuffs on corridor tiles, fresh and hasty, leading toward the archival wing. Cade's tracks? Maybe. Marcus tucked the info away. Inside the chamber, oak benches faced a dais where Bryson, Cade, and 2 legal clerks sat beneath the fortress crest. A digital wall panel displayed Final Sentence Briefing, 1400 HRS. Reporters weren't allowed today, only essential staff. The atmosphere felt thinner than the mountain air outside. Marcus was seated at a defense table. Runa curled at his feet but angled her body so she could watch both dais and door. Captain Corbett stood along the side wall, a manila envelope clutched like a grenade with its pin loose. Bryson cleared his throat. This convening records confirmation that execution will proceed at 1600 tomorrow, barring new exculpatory evidence. Lieutenant Cade, confirm all discovery reviewed. Cade rose, confidence re-glued over the earlier dog incident. Confirmed, sir. No evidence remains outstanding. Corbett stepped forward. Objection, Colonel. New data surfaced this morning. She offered the envelope. Independent cybersecurity analysis shows post-incident tampering with the target grid executed under Lieutenant Cade's credentials. A hush descended, thick and disbelieving. Bryson's eyebrows arched toward his hairline. Serious claim, Doctor. Present proof. Cade scoffed. I object to this circus. Veterinary officers are not qualified forensic analysts. Corbett's eyes flashed. But they are qualified witnesses when Army dogs are harmed by cover-ups. She opened the envelope, producing printouts of Ortega's side-by-side overlays. Bryson accepted them, scanning. His jaw tightened. Cade's veneer cracked. Those prints could be fabricated. Corbett nodded to the rear door. Ortega entered, laptop in hand, escorted by an MP. Sweat beaded his brow, but his voice held. Digital hash signatures match Fortress server backups. Verification chain attached. He plugged HDMI into a projector. The screen filled with code lines sliding into place, ending with bold green. Authenticity, 99.87%. Bryson looked from screen to Cade. Lieutenant, response? Cade opened mouth, shut it. Color drained. For a heartbeat, his posture mirrored prey pinned by spotlight. Runa rose, muscles rippling under vest. She fixed him with an unblinking stare. The effect was electric. No growl this time, just the implacable focus of a predator waiting for truth to surface. Something primal slid across Cade's expression, guilt or fear, before he bolted toward the side exit. MPs intercepted, forced him against the wall as he protested. The room erupted in overlapping commands. Hold him! Secure evidence! Bryson's baritone sliced through. Lieutenant Silas Cade, you are detained pending formal inquiry into evidence tampering, subversion of military justice, and negligent homicide. Remove his sidearm. As cuffs clicked around Cade's wrists, Marcus felt his knees threaten to buckle. Corbett reached him, voice low. It's not over yet. Bryson must still annul the sentence, but Cade's arrest buys time. Marcus inhaled, the air tasting different, charged with ozone and possibility. He crouched, cupped Runa's muzzle. One ridge crossed, girl. One more to go. She licked his knuckles, tail sweeping the chamber floor as if to say, lead and I'll follow. The detention wing quaked with rumors after Lieutenant Silas Cade's abrupt arrest. Guards whispered in threshold shadows. Clerks hustled between offices, clutching evidence boxes like hot coals. Colonel Bryson convened an emergency council inside the Fortress map room, an octagonal chamber where medieval frescoes of crusaders clashed with flat screens humming live data feeds. Marcus, still shackled but seated at a walnut conference table, became the unwilling centerpiece of the deliberations. Runa lay under his chair, chin on paws, her tail aligned with his boot as though they shared a single metronome of nerves. Across from them sat General Helmut Voss, commander of Northern Regional Forces, summoned by satellite phone the moment Bryson filed the detainment report. Voss was granite in human form, block jaw, buzz-cut silvering at the temples, insignia polished bright enough to glare. He scanned Ortega's printed hash report with Arctic calm, then lifted pale eyes to Bryson. Circumstantial. It shows access, not intent. Intent will follow, Captain Mael Corbett insisted from Marcus's left. Give the cyber team a full day and they'll extract the overwritten coordinate string itself. Which would prove Cade killed our soldiers to frame Adler, Marcus added, voice low but steady. Voss snapped the folder shut. Or prove the system glitch flagged the wrong user ID. Meanwhile, the media smells blood. They'll brand us incompetent if a convicted man walks. He pivoted to Bryson. My directive. Proceed with execution unless incontrovertible evidence surfaces before 1800 tonight. Bryson's jaw flexed. Sir, the tribunal already postponed once. Protocol bows to strategic necessity, Voss cut in. We bury our mistakes quickly or the whole wall cracks. Marcus felt Runa's muscles tense under the table. Somehow the dog read the veiled threat. Corbett opened her mouth to protest, but Ortega burst into the room, laptop under his arm and glasses fogging from sprinted breaths. "Found something," he gasped. "The overwrite file Cade pushed? It originated on a secure-in-place thumb drive, not the server. He had to physically insert hardware. He placed a USB stick and evidence bag on the table, recovered from Cade's personal locker moments earlier by military police. The hex ID matched the log. For the first time, Bryson's ice facade fissured into anger. He slid the bag toward Voss. "That looks incontrovertible to me, sir." Voss's eyes chilled another degree. "Chain of custody just began. I will not halt an execution based on an unvetted civilian tech and a veterinarian." His gaze flicked to Marcus. "Adler's stay ends at 1700 unless Judge Advocate General's office telegraphs otherwise." He rose, cloak of authority swirling, and strode out, entourage in tow. The door slammed, rattling ancient mortar joints. Silence recoagulated. Marcus rested a hand on Runa's neck fur, drawing strength from the steady thrum of her pulse. Corbett leaned close. "We still have 6 hours. Ortega opened his laptop, booted a secure line. "I'll live stream a checksum comparison to outside analysts. If we broadcast in real time, Voss can't claim tampering." Bryson rubbed tired eyes. "Do it. Captain Corbett, assign a guard you trust to escort Mr. Ortega. Adler returns to his cell. He'll be called when the review is finished." He met Marcus's gaze, softer now. "Sergeant, I can't promise outcome, but I can promise no evidence will be buried on my watch." Marcus nodded. "That's all I ask." He stood. Runa rose instantly, posture mirroring his resolve. Together they left the council chamber into hallways electric with ticking clocks. Rows of humming blades cast cobalt light over Ortega's intent features as he patched the Fortress fiber line into an external peer review forum of university cryptologists. Corporal Luca Jensen, barely 19, freckles camouflaged as acne, stood sentry, M4 cradled. Jensen had volunteered after hearing Marcus's story through mess hall grapevine. "Never thought I'd guard a hacker for the Army," he muttered, eyes scanning the empty annex. "White hat, kid," Ortega corrected with half a grin, fingers dancing. "Nearly there. Checksum verified by 4 nodes. A sharp metallic clack echoed. Jensen pivoted, weapon ready. Out of the gloom emerged 2 military police officers unfamiliar to him, helmets latched, visors down. "Clear the room," the first barked. "General Voss ordered cybersecurity lockdown." "Bryson overrode that," Jensen countered. The MP produced a signed requisition, Voss's insignia stamped. Ortega whispered, "They'll cut the uplink." Jensen hesitated. Regulation warred with conscience, then turned his rifle sideways, blocking the cable trunk. "Colonel Bryson's authority supersedes any field general in evidence preservation." He quoted regulation by number, voice shaking but loud. The second MP stepped close, hand on sidearm. Tension crackled like bare wires. Then a rumble ripped through the annex. Runa's bark, primal, echoing from the doorway. Jensen, Ortega, and the MPs all jerked as the shepherd bounded in, fur bristling, hackles high. She planted herself between the MPs and Ortega, growl oscillating. Within seconds, Captain Corbett appeared, breathless. "New directive. Bryson's orders stand. Step aside or face obstruction charges." The MPs faltered. In that heartbeat, Ortega hit publish. A progress bar sprinted. Data mirrored to 6 external servers flashed green. The feed went live, copies beyond Fortress reach. Ortega exhaled a shaky laugh. "We're bulletproof." Frost crept across the slit window as Marcus paced, chain clinking. Every minute felt like combat hold under incoming artillery, waiting for the round to land or pass overhead. Runa mirrored him, nails tapping floor in counter rhythm. Suddenly the corridor alarms wailed. The cell door yanked open. Corporal Jensen gestured frantically. "Move! General Voss playing dirty. He's activating emergency war precedents to override Bryson and push your execution now. Colonel sent me, says don't resist, just get to the tribunal chamber." Marcus's veins iced. He slipped ankle cuffs Jensen brought, protocol optics, but wrists stayed free. Runa at heel, he jogged the corridor. Guards argued inside alcoves. One shouted about illegal command chain. Bursting into the tribunal hall, Marcus saw chaos. Voss flanked by loyal officers, Bryson standing tall but cornered. Ortega, Corbett, and a chaplain watched from gallery seats, powerless. Voss pounded a fist on dais. Time expired. Firing squad to yard now. Bryson held up a tablet streaming the mirrored forensic session. Data's authenticated by outside cryptographers. Cade's edits prove Adler was framed. Hackers and civilians aren't court experts, Voss snarled. Marcus stepped forward. Then let Runa testify. The room balked. He continued. She already identified Cade's panic. Let her judge yours, General. Voss scoffed, but curiosity flickered in eyes around room. Bryson nodded. Handler Protocol 19. Canine response as behavioral indicator. Marcus knelt, whispered to Runa, then released her toward Voss. She approached slowly, sniffing the air. At 3 feet, her ears slicked back, lips peeled, exposing white scimitars. A growl slid from her chest, deep as ground tremor. Voss tried to stay motionless, but sweat beaded. Runa advanced another pace, growl crescendo. Suddenly she lunged, not to bite, but to swipe a black data keycard from his belt pouch, teeth clamping plastic. She pivoted and bounded to Marcus, dropping the card at his boots. Ortega retrieved it, inserted into his laptop. A new folder opened. _firebreak _override _backup, with Voss's personal digital signature. Proof of higher-level conspiracy. The tribunal chamber erupted. MPs restraining Voss, cameras flashing, reporters ramming through side doors summoned by Bryson's emergency press order. Outside sirens rose as military police assumed control. Marcus exhaled, eyes burning. He crouched to hug Runa's neck, whispering, "You did it again." Her tail beat resonance through his ribs, tapping alive, alive. Bryson banged a gavel. Execution vacated. Sergeant Adler released to protective custody pending full exoneration. General Voss under arrest. The gavel fell once more, ancient oak echoing final as thunderheads split, and sunlight speared the stained glass windows, setting the hall ablaze with unexpected warmth. A pale wash of sunrise spilled across the frost-rimmed courtyard of Blackthorn Fortress, glazing every stone in crystalline light. 48 hours earlier, those same stones had waited to drink Marcus Adler's blood. Now they echoed only the muted chatter of journalists packing tripods into vans. Inside the infirmary veranda, Marcus breathed in air that no longer tasted of verdicts. Runa lay at his boot tips, demolishing a bowl of venison and rice the mess cooks had prepared, with compliments to the real hero. Steam spiraled from the food, mingling with the slow clouds that marked her contented panting. Captain Mael Corbett emerged with 2 chipped enamel mugs. "Chamomile," she said, offering one. "Figure you're running an adrenaline surplus." "More than a lifetime's worth," Marcus admitted, curling cold fingers around the tin. The tea's honeyed heat seemed to thaw muscle fibers one at a time. Runa finished her breakfast, licked the bowl polished, then rested her chin on Marcus's laces, a silent question about what would come next. Corbett answered first. "JAG has begun full exoneration paperwork. It'll crawl, but Colonel Bryson signed conditional release orders. You're free to leave this rock as of noon." Free. The word slammed into Marcus's chest harder than shackles had. He half expected some bureaucratic claw to snatch it back. Instead, footsteps crunched gravel and Bryson himself approached, wearing a civilian field coat that softened his usual granite silhouette. He carried a thin manila envelope. "Sergeant Adler," Bryson said, voice low enough to hide the tremor of near exhaustion. "These are travel vouchers, back pay, and—" He offered a small box. "A commendation citation. Headquarters insisted. Consider it token restitution, woefully late." Marcus accepted both, unsure what to say. Bryson knelt to scratch behind Runa's ears, prompting her eyelids to flutter half shut. "I served alongside dogs in Fallujah," he murmured to her. "None ever testified in open court. You set a precedent, soldier." Runa answered with a soft grumble of acknowledgement. When the colonel straightened, formality returned. "Transport leaves in an hour. Wherever you go, remember Blackthorn's gates were pried open because you and this dog refused to quit." With that, he turned and left a lighter imprint on the frost than the man who had once ordered rifles leveled. At 10:13, the westbound military liaison train lurched out of the fortress spur. 2 olive-drab passenger cars hitched behind a flat car stacked with stenciled crates. Marcus and Runa occupied a curtained sleeper booth no larger than a pantry. Runa slurped from a collapsible bowl. Marcus pressed his forehead to cold glass, watching alpine ridges slide backward into cloud. Each mile of track felt like a ligament stretching, snapping loose memory knots of mortar shrieks and tribunal echoes. After sundown, the conductor, a round man with a handlebar mustache and the cadence of a vaudeville MC, announced the mess cart was short on snacks but long on conversation. Marcus ventured into the narrow aisle, Runa in practiced heel. In the dining nook, a lone passenger nursed black coffee, an elderly man with a weather-creased face and a faded 1st Cavalry Division windbreaker. He eyed Runa, recognition dawning. "Tracker Shepherd," he said, voice gravelly. "Vietnam vintage or newer issue?" "Newer, Afghanistan," Marcus answered, surprised into formality. The man introduced himself as Walter Pierce, 69, 70 LZ X-ray survivor. Before conversation stiffened into obligatory war stories, he dug into a breast pocket and produced a brass compass the size of a silver dollar. The lid was engraved with an almost smooth set of initials, worn down by decades of thumb swipes. "Kept me pointed home when jungle got turned around," he said, placing it in Marcus's palm. "Looks like your partner already keeps your bearings, but a little redundancy never hurt." Marcus tried to refuse. A stranger's heirloom demanded gravity, but Walter closed his hand over it. "Promise me one thing. Bury it if you ever lose the dog. Otherwise, let it ride your pocket." He winked at Runa. "She'll know which." They changed trains and then buses. At first light, they disembarked in Boulder, Colorado. Then Marcus rented a dented pickup and drove until fatigue smeared headlights into comets. A roadside motel, peeling neon, vacancy sign sputtering, became refuge for the night. Rain hammered the tin roof. Marcus lay on polyester sheets, eyes stapled to a ceiling swirl that seemed to morph into Karak dust vortices. At 3:07, his chest clenched. He sat bolt upright, sweat-soaking collar. His hand fumbled for a non-existent rifle, heart ricocheting. Runa sprang from her floor mat and executed the pressure protocol she'd learned at Walter Reed's canine rehab ward. She braced her forelegs across his thighs, applying firm, even weight, and lowered her head until amber eyes met his. Her breath was measured metronome, coaxing his lungs to follow. 30 seconds, 60. The tremor receded. Marcus slid to the floor, cradling her neck. Rain softened. The motel fridge hummed a lullaby. "Still on watch," Marcus whispered. She licked the salt from his brow, then curled against him until dawn seeped through blinds. They reached the derelict ranger cabin after noon 2 days later. The logging road became a deer trail framed by lodgepole pine. Every rutted dip jolted the truck and Marcus's healing ribs. When the tree line broke, the basin revealed itself like a hidden amphitheater. Meadowgrass riffled by wind, creek silver-threaded at its center, and the cabin, moss-crusted shingles, porch half collapsed, perched on a low knoll like a toppled rook awaiting resurrection. Marcus killed the engine. In the hush he heard nothing man-made, only kestrel cries and the pulse of water over stone. He pocketed Walter's compass, stepped out, and let silence enter him bone deep. Runa bounded forward despite her limp, nose cataloging scents. Marmot, coyote, sap. She paused at the porch beam she would later chew and looked back as if seeking a scent. Marcus laughed, sound raw but genuine. Permission granted. He explored room by room, cobwebs thick as fishnet, wood stove rusted through, yet foundation stones true. In the main room, a shattered mirror leaned against the wall. Marcus's reflection was gaunt, eyes haunted, but behind him Runa stood framed in the broken glass, tail waving like a banner of possible futures. In the cabin's doorway, he hammered the red kerchief Bryson had returned with the exoneration envelope, once tied to Runa's kennel at the fortress, to a cracked support beam. Each strike echoed across the basin, staking claim not just on land but on tomorrow. They camped beside the creek where alder roots formed natural seats. Marcus cooked canned beans on a portable stove. Runa accepted half, chomping happily while creek frogs sang. The starlight in that sky felt larger than the one above Blackthorn, as though cell walls had been peeled away from the cosmos. Journal open on a knee, Marcus drafted the charter that would become Runa's reach. Pillars, canine partnership, veteran sanctuary, mutual repair. In the margins he scribbled fiscal realities, salvage lumber costs, septic overhaul, permits. Numbers frightened him more than mortar fire, but he wrote them anyway. At midnight a nightmare clawed him upright, but this time Runa was already draped across his ankles. He pressed palm to her ribcage, sinking again, and instead of receding into sweat-shiver silence he began to speak aloud. Names of fire breaks fallen, the precise coordinates of each IED they'd disarmed together, the taste of dust after the tribunal verdict. Saying it did not summon ghosts, it released them into starlight. When he finished, Runa nudged a driftwood branch into his hand. Play, she suggested. He threw it once, twice, until the rhythm turned confession into kinetic prayer. Before leaving town for supply runs, Marcus visited a hardware store in Dillon. While Runa charmed the cashier, he browsed shelving until he found a length of leather lanyard. In the truck he looped it through Walter's compass and slipped it over his neck, the brass disc resting against sternum, warm with borrowed faith. Wind barreled down the canyon, ruffling Runa's ears as if whispering coordinates only dogs decode. Marcus tapped the compass, watched the needle steady on a westerly bearing leading deeper into the basin. "She's pointing home," he said, half to the dog, half to whatever listening fate had kept bullets and tribunals from ending them. They drove back to the cabin with lumber piled high. Over the next days they framed windows, patched roof holes with tarps, and cleared brush until muscles screamed. No matter the task, Runa found ways to aid, hauling small boards in her teeth, standing sentinel while the circular saw howled, lying across Marcus's shins when he worked too long without water. On the 7th evening, as they hammered the last brace of a temporary kennel, distant engine noise threaded through trees. Headlights bobbed up the logging road. Marcus set his hammer down, heart thumping an old caution rhythm. But Runa's tail wagged once, not alarm, recognition of possibility. The pickup that topped the ridge was rust-flaked, marine stickers peeling. From the cab climbed Staff Sergeant Delilah Hart and Zephyr, the Malinois whose eyes darted like sparrows. Hart offered a calloused hand and a hesitant smile. "Heard a dog saved a soldier, and the soldier saved that dog right back. Figured there might be room for another pair who need saving." Marcus swallowed the lump that rose. "Room and tools. We start at dawn." A few weeks later, when spring exploded into pollen and bird chorus, 3 tents dotted the meadow, solar panels angled like petals toward sun, and a chalkboard propped against the porch declared, "Daily chow plus chores." Marcus occasionally caught himself gazing across this embryonic community with an awe that bordered on fear. Fear it might crumble like a sand fort beneath high tide. Yet each time doubt crept near, Runa would trot past, compass at her throat now. She had adopted the dangling disc for retrieval games, reminding him bearings were not surrendered lightly. On the final night before the first volunteer wave arrived, Marcus took Runa to the highest bluff. City lights were a pale glow on the far horizon. Overhead, the Milky Way arced like a promise too large to be spoken indoors. He unclipped the compass, opened its lid, and set it on a flat stone between them. The needle swung once, settled on due north, the ridgeline they would patrol in a few hours. "For whoever comes after," Marcus said, voice hushed, "this will always be true north." He closed the lid, slipped the disc into Runa's harness pocket, and scratched the velvet of her ear. She chuffed, nose brushing his cheek in agreement. Below, the single porch light they had wired glowed golden. It was not yet a refuge, not yet a sanctuary, but it was a beginning planted in soil, sweat-watered and vow-fertilized. And as Marcus and Runa descended the bluff, their twin shadows merged in the moonlight, soldier and shepherd moving in step toward the world they would build, one board, one heartbeat at a time. Autumn arrived wearing ember leaves and wood smoke perfume. Runa's reach hummed with life. 5 veterans, 7 dogs, 2 goats, bartered for from a rancher downriver, and a half-finished bunkhouse framed against indigo peaks. Marcus wrote grant proposals between carpentry shifts, fingers still remembering rifle triggers but finding new comfort in sanding cedar rafters. One October afternoon, a dusty sedan rattled into the clearing. A woman stepped out, press badge around her neck, introducing herself as Isolde Crane, investigative journalist whose Fortress photos had gone viral. "I've been tracking stories on canine therapy for PTSD," she said, offering a folder. "Your program's proof of concept. May I embed for a week?" Marcus hesitated. Publicity cut both ways. But Isolde's articles had helped expose General Voss's wider corruption network, pushing parliamentary oversight to fund veteran mental health programs. He nodded. "1 week, but you stack hay and wash bowls like the rest of us." She grinned. "My sneakers are ready." That evening, Isolde shared stew with the group, recorder off, simply listening as Delilah recounted the first time Zephyr alerted to an incoming flashback, head pressed to her chest until the panic tsunami receded. Isolde's eyes shimmered. She scribbled notes only after Delilah nodded permission. Journalism anchored in consent, Marcus realized, could be another form of shelter. Success invited scrutiny. County authorities sent inspection notices citing unlicensed kennel operations. Marcus sat through a tense zoning board meeting where a councilman hinted at noise complaint leverage from upscale vacation cabins down valley. The veterans pooled savings for legal fees, but costs loomed. Weeks later, Marcus returned from the lumber mill to find the main gate padlock snapped and the feed shed ransacked. Bags of canine kibble slashed, solar inverters kicked. Spray paint on the wall read, "No dog farm here." Ethan punched a support beam until knuckles split. Delilah stitched wounds in silence. Isolde documented damage, but also the cleanup. Veterans sweeping shards. Runa nose-checking every kennel occupant. "Who'd attack a therapy refuge?" she muttered. "Fear," Marcus replied, eyes on vandalized wall. "And maybe someone who lost money when Voss fell." That night, Marcus called Bryson, now head of an anti-fraud task force. The colonel promised to nudge local law enforcement. Meanwhile, Ortega overnighted perimeter cameras and motion sensor lights, which Jensen, now an official volunteer, helped install. Runa prowled property edges after dusk, her shadow a silent signature across moonlit grass. Marcus worried the stress might crack her aging joints. She countered by chasing deer off orchards like a pup, reminding everyone legends never retire. Late November, County Board scheduled a final vote. Revoke or grant Runa's Reach a permanent special use permit. Without it, the refuge would shutter. Word spread through veteran networks, prompting a convoy. Motorcycles, battered pickups, even a bus chartered by Gold Star families whose letters Marcus once read aloud on his Fortress bunk. They assembled outside the courthouse, dogs in service vests beside soldiers in mismatched camo. Isolde live-streamed interviews. Her earlier article had already rallied public sympathy. Inside, Marcus delivered a calm 5-minute statement, ending with, "If a dog can pull a man from mortar fire, surely a community can pull together to give them both a place to heal." He stepped back. The board chair cleared his throat, shuffling notes. Before he could speak, a howl rose outside, long, reverberating, joined by a chorus of canine voices. The call seeped through courthouse glass like an ancient hymn. Audience members wiped eyes, even bureaucrats shifted. Permit approved 4-1. Snow muffled the basin, cloaking cabins in hush. The group celebrated solstice with a bonfire ringed by lanterns. Isolde's week-long embed had stretched into 2 months. She now tended goats with practiced hands and had traded columns for grant writing. Ortega visited with new projectors to host outdoor film nights. First screening, archival helmet cam footage he'd edited into tribute for Fire Breaks Fallen, set to Ethan's guitar picking. When the reel ended, silence reigned until Delilah whispered, "Gone but echoed." Zephyr pressed into her side. Runa lay across Marcus's boots, ears flicking at sparks popping overhead. Marcus rose, cup of cider in hand. "To Coda," he stopped, corrected himself. "To Runa, mirror of every K9 that ever carried a soldier's heart back home." He gestured toward the shepherd. She lifted her head, accepting the honor with serene gravity. Cups clinked, breath steamed, constellations wheeled. After midnight, Marcus and Runa made their slow patrol of the perimeter. Snow squeaked under boots and paw pads. He spoke truths aloud. Fears of expansion too fast, of failing these people who believed in him. Runa answered in her way, leaning against his knee so firmly the doubts lost balance and toppled. At the meadow gate he paused, gazing at the refuge aglow, lanterns like fireflies in winter orchard. "We're okay, girl," he murmured. "Friends at our flanks, ghosts at our backs, dawn ahead." Runa looked up, eyes bright amber beneath aurora shimmer, and chuffed. A sound half bark, half laugh, wholly alive. The sound carried across snow-quiet land, bounced from cabin eaves to tree trunks, settling finally in the hearts of those who slept, dreaming of tomorrow made possible by the steadfast beat of paws beside boot prints. Late winter thawed in spasms of sleet and sun, coating the valley road in treacherous films of black ice that split under every tire. The refuge stretched gingerly into March, its half-finished bunkhouse sprouting siding like feathers on a fledgling hawk. Marcus rose before dawn each day, not because alarms insisted, but because memory still did. He checked fence lines, refilled generators, and walked the stream to monitor snowmelt levels. Runa never let him go alone. She was slower now, a stiffness in her hip visible in the first 10 minutes of patrol. But pride held her tail high and her stride steady once the joint warmed. Despite the steady rhythm of chores, tension laced the air like unseen tripwires. County deputies had never identified the vandal who slashed feed sacks. Rumor traced guilt toward a timber development syndicate that coveted the basin's water rights, same clout that once bankrolled General Voss's private security contracts. Marcus filed the theory away, no target to swing at yet. Isolde's long-form article hit global syndication in early March. 18 pages of immersive reporting, portraits of every resident, close-up of Runa's scarred hip in golden evening light. Donations spiked overnight. $50 here, $1,000 there. One anonymous wire transfer large enough to finish the bunkhouse roof. The grateful exhilaration lasted exactly 2 weeks before darker ripples returned. One afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived without postmark, slid under the clinic door. Inside lay a single USB stick and a typed note. "You unearthed one corpse. Dig deeper and the dog dies first." Corbett delivered it to Marcus with gloved fingers and a wary glance at Runa dozing by the wood stove. Ortega air-gapped an old laptop and opened the drive. Footage of Voss shaking hands with an executive from Solvik Timber, signatures on a memorandum transferring mineral rights buried under Runa's reach. Date stamp, 2 days before Voss's arrest. A final frame zoomed on GPS coordinates of the refuge, red X blinking. Nothing overtly criminal, merely a threat disguised as disclosure. Marcus tightened security, motion sensors patched to every tree line, fuel relocated from shed to underground culvert, nightly watch rotations. He hated the militarization of a sanctuary, but he had learned long ago that peace often rested on sentinel shoulders. A cold front plunged the basin into brittle frost the night the first real test arrived. Ethan was walking Zephyr near the orchard when 2 silhouettes breached the western fence. Runa alarm barked from the porch. Marcus sprinted with flashlight and revolver. In beam bounce he glimpsed men in dark clothing, bolt cutters gleaming. One raised something tube-shaped. Marcus's muscle memory snapped. He pushed Ethan down just as a flashbang hissed and detonated, white and sonic. Trees rang. Dogs shrieked. By the time vision returned, the intruders were gone, leaving only a scorched patch of grass and a grenade pin stamped with NATO lot numbers Voss's unit once controlled. No animal or person hurt, but the message howled louder than the explosion. Back off. The next morning, Runa limped severely, joint worsened by the panicked sprint. Corbett prescribed anti-inflammatories and gentle therapy swims in the creek, but Marcus saw something deeper. Runa's eyes carried a smoldering concern reserved for battles she feared he could not win by vigilance alone. He lay beside her on the clinic rug, whispering promises as if vows could armor fur and bone. April stormed in with hot western winds, bending pine tops until they rasped like knives. Drought warnings flickered across county websites. 2 nights before Easter, a dry lightning cell stalled over the basin, hurling forks of white fire. Each strike hammered the valley floor, thunder ricocheting along cliffs. Marcus posted the veterans on lookout, hoses charged. When rain never followed the lightning, a metallic smell rose, ozone laced with smolder. At 2:17 a.m., Jensen yelled from the bunkhouse roof, flames on the southwest ridge, advancing fast through blowdown timber. The slope formed a natural chimney aimed straight at Runa's reach. Marcus's mind kicked into command gear. Delilah and Zephyr marshaled goats into the stone barn. Ethan and Isolde pre-soaked the bunkhouse eaves. Ortega spun up drone recon, live streaming thermal images onto an improvised projector sheet strung between pines. Corbett assembled a field triage kit inside the communal hall. Runa pivoted between stations, barking updates. Her voice the old battlefield cadence none had heard since Blackthorn. Wind gusts hurled sparks half a kilometer ahead of the main flame front. At 3:05, a new ignition lit the north meadow, too far for ember drift. Marcus's gut twisted. Arson accelerant. Someone exploited the lightning chaos. He led Ethan and Jensen with backpack extinguishers, hacking a fire break through dry grass. Runa dashed at his flank despite crippling limp. The prow of heat hit like a physical wall, lungs scorched, eyes streaming. Flames crowned in jack pines, raining ember sleet. Marcus ordered Ethan to flank left, Jensen right, to herd the fire into the natural granite choke point by the creek. Mid-maneuver, Marcus slipped. A burning limb collapsed, pinning his calf. Pain flared white. He tried levering with Pulaski axe, but torque failed. Runa lunged, teeth clamping sleeve, tugging futilely. Smoke clawed his throat. He signaled her away. Instead, she vanished upslope. Seconds ticked magma slow, heat blistering exposed skin. Through roaring static, he heard a diesel roar. Ortega's old flatbed came fishtailing through brush, headlights off to preserve night vision. Runa raced beside it, barking instructions that only sanity's frayed edge translated. Ethan leaned from passenger side, looping a chain under the limb. Ortega gunned the engine, timber shifted, Marcus freed. They hauled him into the flatbed, Runa leaping after, and retreated just as the crown fire hit the creek and starved for fuel. By dawn, smoke columns dwindled to gray ghosts. 10 hectares charred, but the refuge structures stood, singed and ash-grimed yet upright. County fire crews arrived late, citing impassable roads. Nevertheless, they inspected ignition points. The North Meadow start reeked of accelerant, evidence bagged and tagged. Marcus sat on the porch railing, leg bandaged, gaze following Runa as she patrolled the singed perimeter. Ash dusted her fur, tail low but resolute. The rising sun shard through haze, gilding every scar. He realized the refuge survived not by chance, but by communal reflex honed in war and healing alike. Blood family formed by flames. County detectives partnered with state investigators, but the arson case crawled. Meanwhile, an injunction landed on Marcus's desk. Solvik Timber petitioned a federal court to reclaim mineral rights, citing public safety concerns after wildfire near unpermitted medical facility. Heavy paper smelled of boardrooms, not forest. Court date set for June. Legal aid stretched thin. Isolde marshaled her journalist network, publishing a follow-up tracing Solvik's shell companies to an offshore account previously linked to Voss's misappropriated funds. The expose went live 3 days before the hearing, igniting social media storms. Public opinion bent toward the refuge, but Marcus knew judges weighed statute over sentiment. The hearing convened in a glass courthouse downtown. Protesters rallied outside, veterans in wheelchairs, therapy dogs wearing bandanas stitched with Runa's paw print. Runa herself waited in a quiet side room, Corbett at her side, her presence inside the courtroom barred by hygiene codes. Marcus entered, flanked by Delilah and Ethan, all three in modest suits that barely concealed scars. Solvik's counsel argued contract clauses and safety violations. Marcus testified about retreat aims, arson attempts, and wildfire defense. He remained poised until Solvik produced drone footage of Runa's reach ablaze, cherry-picked to imply negligence. Anger flared, but he held ground, citing official fire marshal report blaming accelerant. After 6 hours, the judge recessed for deliberation. Marcus limped into the hallway where Runa greeted him with quiet hum, muzzle nudging his palm. The simple contact melted courtroom chill. 10 minutes later, bailiff summoned parties, ruling for the refuge. Mineral claims void due to fraudulent signatories. Applause erupted in gallery. Marcus exhaled a year's worth of siege. Outside, microphones swarmed. He deferred to Isolde, whose article had tipped the balance by exposing money trails. Reporters switched focus to Runa, still breathtaking in stoic grace. Cameras captured the shepherd lifting a paw to Marcus's knee as if delivering the verdict herself. Summer unfurled like a flag caught by sudden breeze. Lumber trucks bearing donated trusses rolled in. Volunteer squads, students, retirees, bike clubs, painted walls, tilled garden plots. Jensen installed a hydro turbine in the creek, ensuring renewable power. Corbett launched quarterly wellness clinics for local pets, widening community acceptance. Delilah and Zephyr certified as a search and rescue team, contracting with county emergency management. Runa tolerated celebrity with dignified patience, appearing on a national morning show via remote field crew. During the interview, a producer asked what drove Marcus to risk everything for a dog. He answered, "Runa never asked me to deserve her loyalty. She gave it and waited for me to grow into it. This place is my attempt to answer." Mid-July, the refuge held its first public open house. Families picnicked under canvas awnings, children painting paw print tiles to inlay along the newest pathway named Memory Lane. A jazz quartet of off-duty Air Force musicians volunteered music. Runa circulated, accepting gentle pats, occasionally retreating to shade when joints protested. At sunset, Marcus gathered visitors by the paddock. He unveiled a polished bronze plaque mounted on basalt. In honor of all souls, human and canine, who carried one another through fire into dawn. Beneath, smaller letters. Runa's watch never ends. Emotion thickened throats. Even Zephyr emitted a mournful keening note answered by echoes from distant ridge. That night, Marcus and Ethan sat on the porch, feet on rail, watching Perseid meteors cut silver grooves. Fireflies blinked around orchard edges. Goats murmured sleepy complaints. Marcus felt contentment settle deeper than any metal's pride, an ache and a balm at once. He turned to say something when Runa, lying between them, rose stiffly, walked to the yard and stopped, nose lifted to wind. A minute later, a coyote's call wailed from forest. Runa tipped her muzzle skyward and answered with a single resonant bark that rolled off hills like a temple bell. Marcus understood. Boundary claimed, sanctuary declared. Autumn reclaimed the peaks with crimson and ochre. Runa's silver muzzle glistened in frost-filtered dawn. She still joined Marcus for morning rounds, but more slowly, a regal carriage rather than warrior stride. On the anniversary of the Blackthorn exoneration, Marcus led her on the full perimeter trail, 2 kilometers of rolling pasture and pine shade. Ethan and Delilah offered to drive an ATV in case she tired. Marcus declined gently. "She'll tell me when enough is enough." They set out at first light. Grass slick with dew dampened Runa's pads. She placed each step carefully. Marcus narrated the year's improvements. Solar panel expansion. New therapy wing blueprint. Runa's ears twitched, acknowledging even if comprehension belonged to some deeper sense beyond language. At the creek footbridge, she paused, gaze lingering on water swirling beneath planks. Marcus crouched, brushing her shoulder. "Remember Carrick Stream? You dove to pull me out when I slipped crossing. Different world." Runa dipped her head, licked his knuckles. They continued, climbing the eastern knoll where the fire had once roared. Charred trunks stood like blackened monoliths among new saplings flame willow green. At Ridgecrest, Runa halted. Sunrise ignited valley mist into rose-gold ocean. She sat, breathing deep, as if cataloging scents for archives no human could read. Marcus sank beside her. Memories interleaved. Court-martial spotlight glare, fortress storm wind, crackle of wildfire, and over them this hush, the world holding breath. Minutes passed uncounted. Runa slowly leaned, resting her weight against his thigh. He felt tremor in her flank, subtle but insistent. She looked up, amber eyes soft as dusk. Something ancient moved behind that gaze. A farewell without sorrow. Marcus's throat constricted. "Not yet," he whispered. Runa blinked once, serene. The tremor eased, her breaths lengthened, then stilled to gentle rise-fall. A breeze lifted her coat hairs, setting each shining in sunfire. Marcus pressed both hands to her chest, feeling the heartbeat steady but slower than he'd ever known it. They remained until the sun climbed high. When Runa rose, she did so unsteadily. Marcus supported her, and together they descended the ridge. At the paddock gate, she halted a second time, surveying cabins, gardens, veterans chopping wood. Zephyr trotted over, sniffed respectfully. Runa touched noses, an anointing of succession. That evening she took her customary post on the porch, head on crossed paws. Stars bloomed. Marcus read reports by lamplight, occasionally reaching down to scratch her ear. Near midnight her breathing changed. Deeper inhale, long exhale. He set papers aside, slid to the floor, cradled her head. She gazed at him, lids drooping. He whispered every thank you language possessed, and many it did not. When her last breath came, it was silent. It was complete. He did not move until pink edged the horizon and orchard birds started their tentative gossip. Then he lifted her gently, wrapped in the red kerchief they once tied to claim the land. Veterans gathered wordlessly, forming an honor guard down the path to the old apple tree by the creek, Runa's favorite shade. They buried her there, beneath soil enriched by wildfire ash and spring rains alike. Marcus placed a river-smoothed stone at the head, carved only with her name and the paw-print tile a child had painted months earlier. No bugle sounded, no 21-gun salute. Yet when the first light struck the marker, a flock of geese crossed overhead, their honks fading down valley like distant trumpet. Grief did not break the refuge. It permeated like river water, finding every root and fleshing it with life. In the days after Runa's passing, Zephyr began patrolling at dawn, tail held in quiet confidence. The goats fell silent for a whole morning, then resumed their unruly choir. Jensen forged a memorial wind chime from spent rifle casings he had saved since basic training. It hung from the apple branch, singing whenever breeze tipped the valley. Marcus spent that week in purposeful labor. He finished the therapy wing roof alone, each nail an ode. He aired Runa's bed on the porch, then washed and folded the blanket, placing it atop the bookshelf inside the communal hall where newcomers could see and ask about its story. Letters arrived by the dozen, photos of rescue dogs sleeping on veteran laps, children sketching Runa in crayon halos. One envelope containing a Medal of Valor from a Marine who wrote, "She earned this more than I did." Isolde compiled them into a bound volume titled Echoes of Paws on Stone, gifting the first copy to Marcus on a rain-silver morning. He traced the embossed cover, lips curving despite wet eyes. Summer returned, green as forgiveness. The orchard bloomed lavish, petals drifting along memory lane like confetti for unseen parades. On Runa's birthday, the refuge held a dedication ceremony for the new clinic wing, now named the Shepherd's Heart Center. Corbett unveiled a bronze sculpture by a local artist. Runa mid-stride, ears forward, gaze fixed beyond the horizon. The likeness stunned everyone into silence before applause rose, ragged but fierce. Marcus stepped to the podium, yet found himself speechless. He simply laid a hand on the sculpture's steel-warm flank and said, "Lead and we'll follow," the phrase he'd whispered the night Blackthorn chains fell away. Those gathered repeated it, voices weaving through pines. That evening, while sunset lit window panes like stained glass, Marcus sat beneath Runa's tree. Zephyr trotted up, dropped a pine cone in his lap, an invitation. Marcus tossed it. Zephyr bounded after. The game continued until dusk thickened. He gazed up at first star puncturing violet sky and felt, not absence, but current, like underground spring feeding every blade of grass, unseen yet certain. He rose, brushing dew from knees, and walked toward the cabins where laughter chimed through open shutters. Behind him, wind stirred the casing's chime, playing a soft, metallic cadence. It sounded almost like a heartbeat or the tapping of a tail on wooden porch boards, steady, unending, guiding the night watch into another dawn. The soldier's last wish had been to see his dog. What he received was an unbroken legacy, etched in every saved life and every footstep along that valley trail, where paw prints and boot prints would mingle for generations, leading whoever needed it toward the kind of mourning no executioner could ever erase.